Welcome to The Price of Admission, episode 101 with Jeremy Harrell. Today's conversation is one that will challenge us on the way we view suffering. There's a saying that suffering is the soil where growth takes root. No one embodies this better than my guest today, Jeremy Harrell. Jeremy is a man who's walked through the fire, both in his time serving as a combat vet in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and in his personal and professional life after the uniform came off. He's the founder of Veterans Club, Inc., right here in Louisville, Kentucky, an organization that's helped countless veterans and first responders heal, to help them grow and rediscover purpose. But Jeremy's story is more than just service. It's a story of enduring hardship, learning from it, and turning pain into a platform for progress. I remember seeing Jeremy on the local and national news frequently, living here in the Louisville metro area, especially during the COVID days, 2020 and 2021. In this episode, we'll explore how Jeremy's toughest battles became his greatest teachers, and how the lessons he's learned can inspire us all to find meaning in our own struggles, and how to stand up, and how to do what's right, even when it's hard. So if you ever wondered how suffering can shape you into a person you're meant to be, this episode's for you. And now, Jeremy Harrell. Let's go. All right, so a special episode today. We've got a guy named Jeremy Harrell, also known as the Closer. Got to ask you why. The Closer is a nickname for you. Where'd you get that?
So I got that just recently. So one of the other things I do outside of run Veterans Club is I'm a chaplain, a rapid response chaplain with the Billy Graham Foundation. And I deployed with the Billy Graham Foundation to Florida to help with Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton recovery efforts. And part of my role as a chaplain is to come in behind Samaritan's Purse and talk to the homeowners and kind of check in with them and see what their faith, what their faith walks like, and if they're connected to a church, and if they're a believer. And oftentimes they're not, but they're looking for that. And the nickname Closer came because when I first went down to Florida, they had been down there for several weeks, and they had 5 or 6 people who have given their life to Christ. And then the week that I was there, we had 25. Right. So my partner, that's the nickname that he gave me. And so then the whole team started giving me the name The Closer, because we were pretty successful at getting people to understand how important it was to have Christ in their life.
Awesome. Well, that's a good story, and that's a good reason to have that one. Jeremy's a 9-year Army combat vet. You transitioned out in 2008-ish.
Yes.
And the founder of a nationally recognized nonprofit, the Louisville, and I'm from Texas, so I've been practicing my Louisville pronunciation, the Veterans Club. Stood that up in 2017,
yes.
Right here close by where I live as well. So that's pretty cool. Veterans Advocate, developed many programs through that. And, one was equine facilitated mentoring program, tiny home community for homeless vets, other programs assisting vets with PTSD, TBI, traumatic brain injuries, substance abuse, and homelessness. You mentioned the chaplain thing. You do some consulting, podcasting, public speaking, and, enjoy horses, kayaking, traveling, spending time with your German Shepherd. I got a German Shepherd as well. So,
okay. Yeah.
That's cool. Currently, you're going through a legal battle with the VA, which we'll get into.
Okay.
Well, welcome to Price of Admission. Brief intro so people know who I'm talking to. But I remember seeing you a lot on the news a couple of years ago. I mean, it was when all the Breonna Taylor stuff was going down, and everyone's looking for some hope and some something positive, and you were kind of that guy during that time.
Try to be.
So yeah, tell us more. Want to hear your story. Want to hear a transition, something you learned. Really kind of get into all about you. So.
Yeah, man. So I'll start in my childhood. Right, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. Right, Louisville. You're getting there, Tony, with the Louisville pronunciation.
Yeah, I hear you're supposed to pronounce it like you got a mouthful of marbles. So
that's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and so grew up here, but moved around a little bit with my parents, and then kind of grew up in an environment, a dysfunctional environment, to be honest, just not a good environment for anybody to grow up in. Decided that I had to figure out a way to get away from that and to start my own life. And I always had this desire to serve others. And I thought, well, the best way I can do this and the most affordable way for a poor kid from South Louisville to do this is to join the military. And so I joined the military right after high school and went into the Army. And like you said, served in the Army for 9 years. Got out, tried to get into the corporate world. Felt like I did okay as far as success is concerned. But personally, I was a train wreck, right? And so after about a decade of trying to figure out, what everyone said they thought was kind of going wrong with me, I finally had a boss when I worked in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. I worked for a logistics company that supported Nestle Foods. So if anybody's ever curious to where all the Hot Pockets are made in the world, they're made in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. Nice. Right. So while I was there, I was running a team, did really well. Again, I think one thing to mention about our community is we're driven people, and we're willing to sacrifice everything for success, right? Because the military is so merit based, and it's really kind of survival of the fittest, and so it conditions you to kind of respond that way, even on the outside. And although I was being successful in my career to an extent, personally, I was going through destruction. And what I mean by that is eventually my boss at this company I worked for, he approached me. He was a Marine. They don't like to be called former Marines, from what I understand, but he was a Marine. He come up to me and he said, Jeremy, there's some issue. And I've noticed some cognitive issues with you. I've noticed that your employees have come up the chain of command and told me that you're unapproachable, and there's some performance issues because you're not getting rest at home. All these things. And so I told him the truth. I said, I'm battling this internal battle. I'm dealing with these memories and these experiences I had in service, and I'm doing my best to keep pushing forward to try to minimize it so that I can continue this mission here with this company. But sometimes it gets the best of me. Well, his response was, I'm going to have to let you go. And I would like for you to go to the VA to get some help, to figure out what's wrong, to get on the other side of this. And my initial response, Tony, was, how in the world could a brother, right, do this to me? I had a brand new baby boy, right? And obviously we all need money. We all need a job. And I said, how could he do this? How could he fire me at a time like this and in my most vulnerable state? But in reality, very shortly later on, I learned that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I would not have gotten the help that I needed because I would have just done what a lot of us do. I would have just pushed through, embraced the suck, right? Just keep moving and letting this dumpster fire happen around me. And what that looks like personally is I'm on my fourth wife, right? My first three marriages were very bad because I wasn't dealing with the issues that I had. I had some issues being a father. I wasn't as good of a father as I wish I would have been at that time. And so there was a plethora of things going on. And then when I finally went to the VA, I realized after they sent me through all these evaluations, I felt like a hamster in a cage. And they realized, they diagnosed me with several different diagnoses, one being PTSD, TBI, some physical stuff, degenerative disc, cervical, all this stuff. And I remember walking out of the VA going, man, like I am a broken man, and I had no idea, right? So I left feeling worse than when I went, because again, even though all this stuff was prevalent in my life, I didn't address it. I just kind of thought it was the new normal. This is what happens when you get out of the military and you've experienced these things. But over time, I kept going and getting the help I needed, kept going to these programs. And then eventually the VA said, hey, we believe that because of your service-connected disabilities, you can't do the job that you once could. And so we're gonna rate you as unemployable and mark you permanent and totally disabled. And I want to hit on that real quick because
Yeah.
I see a lot of things online about veterans who seem to be really seeking that permanent total 100% status because you know there's a plethora of reasons, right? There's benefits with that. It's almost like you're retired. It's more money. Um, but that was one of the worst things that ever happened to me, man, because I'm an ambitious guy. I mean, I think that's obvious when you look at the bio,
Yeah.
and all I
Humbling
can
experience.
yeah, and all I can remember was, man, is this what's next for me? Like I'm just going to be this permanently disabled man at 30 years old, and what am I expected to do? Right. So I got really depressed. It wasn't a celebratory thing for me. I got really
Yeah.
depressed. And so then I started, going to these programs around the country. And all I could keep hearing from veterans is they didn't necessarily miss the job for the most part, right? They missed the sense of camaraderie. They missed the connection. And and I just thought we don't have to miss that just because we're not in uniform anymore. And so this idea coming to my mind, how can we create that same level of bonding and same level of connection that we had while serving, even though we're not serving anymore? And so that was the idea behind Veterans Club. And so one day I started a private Facebook group called Veterans Club. I wanted to use a very generic name because I wanted it to be something that everybody could relate to. And for the first 6 months, there was probably 20 or 30 people, right? And then we just started using these common sense approaches to helping veterans, like family cookouts, recreational activities, meeting each other at a ball game, stuff like that. And it just blew up. It just blew up, and it caught the attention of the powers to be around the country. And one key element, and I'll talk more about this when we get to the point about this legal battle, but one key element about me doing this service work um, is the benefit, the therapeutic benefit that I got from helping other people, man. There is not a
Yeah.
better medicine in the
Was
world.
Trump at a rally or something said something like, "Hey, you know what the best thing for depression is? Work your ass off." And that's,
Yeah.
you know, there's some truth to that because, whenever I'm feeling down, I'm just like, all right, what's next? Let me do something.
Yeah. It's that mission purpose that the military ingrains in us.
Yeah.
And we need it. Like it's not, I think, I don't think I know now for sure that it's not optional. We have to have some level of mission purpose. And I thought, okay, well, if God is going to take care of my family this way, if I have to accept this diagnosis and these disabilities from experts, then I'm going to spend the rest of my time doing all I can to help other people like me, right? Or similar to me, uh, whether they're currently serving or they have served, and even first responders. And so that was kind of my way of giving back to the country to continue to serve. And so that's essentially how Veterans Club got started. And then, we just started getting noticed about, the programs that we started creating. And all these programs were ideas that come to me just sometimes just while on a walk, right? Or reading a book or something like that. And I had no idea, honestly, that these things would take off the way they did. And the key to that, Tony, is I didn't really care if they did, right? I didn't put so much pressure on
Yeah.
myself to be this like super empire building, leader. I just wanted to help the next guy or the next female veteran, one veteran at a time. And that's, I think that's important because sometimes we can get lost in the outcome. We want to see this huge, return, but it's one step at a time. And so
Yeah,
that's how
that's the way to
veterans,
do it. I think
yeah,
about, for me personally, like every time I get selfish with something and I start thinking of, oh, the benefits, this is going to be good and yada, yada, yada,
yeah,
something goes bad. Right.
that's right.
But when you do that, just like you said, where's the fuel coming from? Is the direction in the right direction? The right
Yeah,
direction being, just, morally value, like all those good things you think about. If those are the carrot, then let it happen. And
yeah,
it usually always works out. That always works out.
yeah. Well, if you just, if you just stay focused on the mission, right? Like oftentimes, I think successful leaders on all levels, we have to protect ourselves against this mentality that we get so successful that we focus on the success and less on the mission, right? And I call it mission drift, right? You're just kind of drifting away from
Yeah.
the mission because, I mean, it could have happened to me in a lot of ways because once this started to catch on and it started to catch the attention, there were people coming up from all over the place, that needed something from me, that wanted to hear from me. And I had to always make sure that I stayed on mission and I stayed focused on helping the one veteran at a time. It would have been very easy for me to get off track. And so I think that's important to mention for folks who are leading at whatever level. But yeah, and so we kept doing that, and then we kept having so much effectiveness and so much success at helping veterans and reducing suicide locally that it started to expand all over the country. And then Fox and CNN, people like that, they'd reach out and they started to consider me like an SME on mental health with veterans and transition and all the things military related. And man, we just kept going, and it ended up, we're serving thousands of veterans now. I love the team that we brought together. I love veterans hearing stories when they come in, or they email us and they tell us about how it's changed their life in a positive way. And our most recent program, I think it fits well in this podcast. Our most recent program, the Resilient Mind program, is a program about empowering veterans to meet their goals, right? And what that looks like is, I think there's a lot of programs out there, Tony, and that do a really good job of helping veterans who need it, whether it be mental, whether it be employment, career, homelessness, all that stuff, and it's very much necessary. But I felt like there wasn't a whole lot for the veterans who are functioning well, and the veterans who have overcome those things. And so I feel like they need support too, right? Just because we're successful, just because we're functioning, doesn't mean that we don't need people. And so I developed this program really to ask veterans who may have been held down by cancer or PTSD or divorce or whatever it is they're going through. I said, what is it that you wanted to do before all this stuff got in the way, right? And they're like, well, I've always wanted to own a business. I've always wanted to own a car wash or something like that, right? And then we had a team of people who were business owners, and then they would mentor these veterans and help them get to that point. And I thought that was incredible because you went from the valley, right? You worked through that. Now you're halfway up the mountain. Now Veterans Club is going to come in and we're going to help you get to the peak again. And I'm really proud of that program. So yeah.
Yeah, and to have a good mentor can fast track your career, can fast track your progression on whatever that vision is.
Yeah.
That is so true.
Yeah.
So, the extension. So you said the program grew like from a national standpoint. Are there different same club, different area type of setup? Is that what that is?
Yeah. So we have a couple of like chapters in different places, but outside of that, a lot of our programs we've developed that veterans all over the country can be a part of it. For example, that Resilient Mind program, right? That's a program that you don't have to be on site or local to, you can hop on Zoom for your weekly mentor meetings. And we've also consulted with other organizations around the country. I've been to, it used to be called Lone Survivor Foundation, something different now, I think Operation Red Wing, something like that. I've talked to them about their equine program. I've helped other organizations who are starting in different states develop some programs. I know that we're expanding our equine program to different states. That's where we're currently at now. We're trying to find a way to do that. And that's a big move, so it takes a while. But our overall goal is to have a chapter in every state. Absolutely.
Gotcha. Have you ever heard of PB Abate?
I haven't.
Okay,
No.
it's another similar thing, different types of programs,
Yeah.
but deploy with the guy that started that up, and it's really gotten a lot of traction. And I think he did it over
Awesome.
the COVID period time frame, and they had like a base up in Montana that, hey, you want to be a
Hmm.
part of this club, you want to be a part of that club, come join us.
That's
It's all
awesome. I'm gonna
vets.
check
It's
it
not,
out.
You don't have to be a combat vet. You don't have to be whatever, breaking down those to be, everyone's served,
Yeah, yeah,
come,
absolutely.
come fill a sandbag type of thing. Well,
Yeah,
cool.
I'll check it out.
What made you want to join the Army? You said, hey, I wanted to get out of this place. Was there anything else? And why did you choose the Army over other services?
Yeah, man, I did. The other thing is, I've always had this deep desire to serve others. I feel like, from an early age, I always just got a really good feeling from helping others. And I remember like being in the delayed entry program at 17 years old, waiting to ship out and taking grocery store orders at senior living apartments when it snowed, right? And bringing groceries to folks who couldn't get out. I just always had that innate desire to do that. I think it was because there was so much trauma in my childhood that it made me more empathetic to people and more compassionate because obviously I knew what it was like at an early age to suffer.
Yeah.
And so
Do
it
you have
just
gun battles outside your house like West Louisville has now?
no, we didn't do that. It was more that would have been better, I think. I think the we had internal battles, right? We
Ah,
had
okay.
in the house
Gotcha.
battles, domestic violence, stuff like that. I'd much rather had seen outside battles, but no, yeah. And so the reason why I joined the Army, I went to the Marine Corps first, and the Army tricked me in this way. They're pretty good at that, right? But I went to the Marine Corps first, and again, I didn't have any money, and so the Marine Corps was like, "Hey, you're gonna have to buy your uniforms," and I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not gonna go do what a small percentage of people do and then have to buy my uniform."
Yeah.
And I didn't have any money, right? So I said, "Well, I'll go over to the Army because they didn't tell me that I had to buy my uniform." Now, when you get there, they tell you you have to buy your uniform, right?
Gotcha.
But that was the biggest reason, honestly, that I joined the military, I joined the Army over any other branch. So
So the Marine
yeah,
Corps was truthful and upfront with you from the beginning. Got
yes. And unfortunately, I have to say that
yeah.
that specific recruiter was not. He just wanted it,
Well,
he just wanted me. So
that was a good lesson to get early,
yeah,
rather than later, for sure.
yeah.
Um, well, cool. Army experience. Any key takeaways right there that you know you want to get into?
Well, I mean,
You don't have
I
to.
would, yeah, no, I would just say that overall, it's a lot, it's a lot like life. There's some highs and lows, and I think the deployment to Iraq during the initial invasion, working at enemy prisoner of war camps, I feel like that taught me a whole lot about, especially when it comes to faith, about the separation of God and sin and it also taught me a lot about brotherhood. It taught me a lot about authentic relationships. It taught me some negative things about how honorary we can be to one another, like what one man can do to another man. The evil in the world. But man, as hard as it's been, and I've been working my whole adult life to try to overcome some of it. I wouldn't trade it for anything because I do believe we made progress there, and I do believe that my service mattered. I know there's a lot of vets that suffer with that, especially vets that don't deploy. Um, they feel like maybe they didn't do enough, and I really hate that because as soon as you raised your right hand, you've done enough, you've done a lot, and we don't get to choose where we go typically. And so, I really learned a lot from my service. I would never not do it, and if they ever needed me again, of course I'm not in shape anymore, but if they ever needed me again, I would do my best to serve still. So yeah, I
Gotcha.
enjoyed the time. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So transition. You said you went into corporate. You did 10 years of that. From leaving Army into that next role. How'd that go for you?
Well, as you can imagine, Tony, you've probably heard this 1,000 times. It is an adjustment period. It is very difficult.
What was the biggest adjustment that you had to make?
I think the lack of discipline, right, in the civilian workforce. Um, it was either I'm trying to figure that out, right? It was either lack of discipline or I was just too intense, which I've been called.
Yeah.
But I just felt like there was really no sense of duty. It was more all about like what the company can do for me, not so much what I can do for the company. And the military, it's opposite of that. Like what can we do for the Army or what can you do for the Navy?
Yeah.
And it just getting people to to work hard. I felt like was difficult. The work ethic wasn't as strong, and and so that was the initial challenging, especially as a manager, right? Leading people, trying to
Yeah.
get them to understand that sometimes we have to stay until the job's done, and being willing and motivated to do that. And so it was just really trying to get used to the civilian world as a whole. I remember walking in a mall with my kids and feeling, being behind a shopper, right, and going, man, why are they walking so slow? Like, this is, come on, like, don't you know where you're going? Don't you know what kind of thing? So
Yeah, I still
it
do
was,
that with my son. Like, let's go. Come on.
yeah. I mean, I don't think it ever leaves us, but mainly just trying to kind of adapt to the new way of doing business, and also trying to instill some of the values we learn in the military into the corporate world. Sometimes that's met with a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
Sometimes people think that you're trying too hard, right? Or that you're trying to overachieve or whatever it is. And in reality, I felt like you hired me to do a job, and I'm just trying to do that job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
With
that was challenging initially.
with
Yeah.
there any specific things you did with the people to adjust your style at all during that time?
Yeah. Yeah. It started with me. To be honest, I had to come to the realization. I think sometimes, leaders in the military have to do that. Is I can't expect these people to understand what it's like to have that military bearing, right? To they just never will, unless they've served before, which we had, obviously employees who have served, but I just couldn't expect the same thing from these people. And I had to find a new way of communication, right? Because in the military, as a leader, you just make a decision, and everybody that's lower ranking than you, they have to do what it is that you ask them to do. It doesn't work that way, right, in the civilian sector. And really, what it did is it made me a better leader, because it created an opportunity for me to take the time to sit down with employees and tell them the why, right? I noticed that was a big difference. Like in the civilian sector, people would do it, but they needed to know why sometimes.
Yeah.
And in the military, it's just really not like this. Like, hey, go do this, and they're like, yes, sir, right? And they go do it, or yes, sergeant, and they go do it. But so what it did is it slowed me down. It allowed for better critical thinking. It allowed for me to be more empathetic as a leader and kind of lead from the heart. And be more of that servant leader, which I'm proud to say that I am now, which is leading through servitude, right? What is it that I can do as a leader to make you better? Do you need more training? Do you need more tools? Do you need more resources? Whatever it is, let me know. Whereas initially I wasn't. I was figure out how to get it done and just come tell me you're done when you're done, right? Kind of thing. And so, yeah, man. So, it created a lot of opportunity for self-growth. It was one of the most difficult, but again, one of the most rewarding parts of my life. And it's kind of the value of this show. One of the values of this show is that's the payment, right? That's the cost. Is sometimes you got to fall flat on your face in order to really, adjust fire and figure out how you go forward. So
Perfect segue into the end of that 10-year period, which was, you leaving that company, your boss that you were talking about earlier.
yeah.
So finding some sort of a rock bottom. Tell us more about that experience and how that
Yeah.
ended up, because rock bottom's a great foundation to, start again, start something new, shift course, stay the course.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start by saying I believe that everybody should hit rock bottom once at least, right? Because you're right. I mean, it sucks. I'm going to tell you. I mean, Tony, like
I've done it a few times.
Yeah, it kills you, man. But at the same time, when you've hit rock bottom, you get this comfort of going, okay, I can't go any further. The only way I can go now is up, right?
It's like the underdog in a football game. It's like the underdog in the MMA match. Like, hey, I'm not holding anything back. I got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It's like Rudy, right? The movie Rudy. So anyway, when they told me that I had all these disabilities, and then I went to this 45-day inpatient program at the VA for PTSD, and again become rated permanent and totally disabled. It just hit me hard, because I thought, man, this is not the goal that I had, right? This is not the marker I set for myself, I'm actually what I thought at that time, I'm going backwards. Like I'm supposed to be climbing the corporate ladder, right? I want to be, the highest level of leader I can be, right? I want to make a difference. I don't want to be known as the guy who has this disability or the guy who is unemployable or this guy who is permanent. I didn't want it. And
Yeah.
and because I had a wrong idea of what success looks like. And I put success and I put all that in a box, right? That only people high up the corporate ladder were considered successful, right? That no one else could really be, or whoever wins the Super Bowl, right? Or whoever wins MVP, right? Only guys like Tom Brady, right, were successful. But in reality, I know that wasn't the truth. And so as I started to understand and accept these limitations and accept the fact that I have to move in a different direction, I started to really just sit down and find out, line by line, what I wanted to do to improve myself. And man, I venture to say that I've acquired more success as a disabled veteran than I ever would have or ever have in any other capacity of my life. And that's because I didn't allow the setback to interfere with the comeback,
Yeah.
right? I think the first part of that is acceptance. Accepting, hey, Jeremy, you have these limitations. I know you don't like it. Nobody would, but you have them. What are you going to do now? And I had a choice. I could have either just sat there and felt sorry for myself. I could have been on the couch with a pistol in my mouth, right? And I thought about that many nights, no, in full transparency. Or I could take what life has given me. I could take what God has put in front of me, and I could use that for good in some way. And that's why I chose to serve despite my disability in any way that I could. And again, man, it really resilience was the key at that point in my life is
Yeah.
learning resilience and applying it to my life and to find out a way to win regardless of what happens, right? You're a football guy, right? You play football. If you get injured, you're going to do your best to stay in the game. And even if you can't perform like you would if you weren't injured, you're still going to give it 100%, right? You're still going to try to
Yeah.
be effective. And that's kind of the mentality I had moving forward.
How long did it take you to tame that beast? I think of it as
Yeah.
like a domestication of sorts,
Yeah.
because
It,
you're like hard charge. This is me. Oh crap. This is not me anymore. I'm changing. Like how'd that time period go for you?
so it took me a little over a year.
Yeah.
And that whole year, again, I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? I might as well just quit. I'm never going to be able to overcome this. Now I have this dark cloud over me. And then I went through all that for about a year, and then I got up one day and I just like, this isn't. There's two things, right? This isn't what my family expects out of me, and this isn't what God wants for me. And I need to figure out, and I need to start by asking Him to reveal to me what it is He wants me to do next. And then I need to just keep climbing. I need to keep pushing, and I need to use that same tenacity that has gotten me to other successful points in my life, and I need to apply that to this new journey. And
Mhm.
just realize to take the pressure off myself and just know that it is a journey. And so for folks out there that are looking for instant success, which I see that often now, I think everything's so instant, like with social media and all the information we have, that I think even in business, sometimes people are like, oh man, I should instantly be, a Fortune 500 company. And it's like, no, right? Because even if you could do that, like even if I could have avoided all this heartache to get to the point that I got, I wouldn't have wanted to do that because I wouldn't have learned everything that I learned along the way. We learn
Sure, man.
so much in failure, right? So it took me about a little over a year to put
Yeah.
my bootstraps on and go, hey man, let's go. We can't hang out here. We got to move forward. Yeah,
What stood out to me in that was one day. So one
yeah,
day you woke up,
yeah,
right? What was
yeah.
that revelation like that one day?
Well, I woke up and I had all these, appointments, and I was reading these appointments and I was reading like these notes that these doctors said, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. You won't be able to do this anymore. And I was just tired of it, right? And I said, they don't get to choose, right? They don't get to choose what I do and what I don't do. maybe they're right, but I'm not going to not try to beat it, right? Maybe they're right, but maybe they're not right. And because there was that percentage of chance that they weren't right in regards to, wanting me just to hibernate in the house and isolate, I decided to push that theory and to try to figure out, can I beat this? And I tried and I stumbled, but the one thing, Tony, that helped me overcome it was sitting down with another veteran who had some of the same issues I did, and us coming together and figuring out a way to hold ourselves accountable to each other to push through it.
Gotcha.
And we did that one day after the next, and one veteran after the next. Next day, we're doing this for thousands of veterans, and man, it was the medicine. It was the cure. The cure was to just focus on something outside of yourself, focus on something bigger than you, and realize that we can do almost anything we set our mind to if we're super disciplined while we try to do it.
Awesome. That's good stuff. For me, a lot of the times when I'm feeling like that, the gym and physical activity is the key.
Yeah.
From that standpoint. All right. So then you start the Veterans Club. How'd that come about? Was it like an epiphany? Was it just having those conversations? You're like, all right, I need to do this on a bigger scale. How did that develop over time for the organization?
Yeah, so it was a multitude of things. I think the most prevalent part because initially I just wanted it to be a social group. I didn't really want to be a nonprofit because I didn't want a title. I didn't want anybody not to come to me and feel comfortable talking to me because I had some title, right? Like founder and CEO and stuff like that. But I've also realized that veterans wasn't getting the help and the care they needed, and they were often underserved, even at the veterans' number one agency, right, the VA. And so I thought, well, I want to fill the gaps. How can we as an organization fill the gaps so that veterans aren't underserved? And so then in order for me to do that, though, I had some mentors, and I still have them. I'm very grateful for them, who said, Jeremy, you probably should be a nonprofit so that you can get funding and you can reach more people and more veterans and more first responders, things like that. And so that's how we started becoming a nonprofit. We started doing the work in 2017. We became an official nonprofit in 2019. And but the whole point was, I just felt like veterans, they weren't getting the treatment that they needed, as far as, you go to the VA, you're a cog in the wheel, you're a number, right? They ask you. I don't know if you've been, Tony, but when you
I
go
recently started going to the VA, and I've never
Yeah.
used the VA for any kind of medical stuff because I've had some bad experiences. I'm like, I'm not going back there.
Right.
But yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah. So you go in, and the first question they ask is, what's your last name and your last four?
Yep.
And I hated that, man. It's like, we're much more than a roster number. We're much more than, and it was more of like, okay, you're here, just check the box, we'll see you later. So I wanted to do something more intimate. I wanted to create a community within a community where veterans feel like they have this extended family. And that's why our motto is doing life together. I wanted to create this huge group of like-minded individuals who understand one another in a world where we're very much misunderstood, put them together and allow us to do life and support one another the same way we would if we were still in uniform. And that was the purpose behind Veterans Club and expanding and growing. And it got to the point where the VA recognized this, right? And they asked me to be a consultant to their executive leadership team. Nice. Then they started having town hall meetings at our headquarters. Then they started having, program graduations at our headquarters. They just realized that what we were doing, they were unable to do because of the red tape, right? And so I basically went to the VA and said, hey, what is it that you would like to do that you can't do because of the red tape? They would tell me, and I would create that, right? And so it was a really good partnership until they complained against me and went into a legal situation. Yeah.
Yeah. What triggered that? We'll talk. Is there a trigger for that? And tell us the rest of what's going on there.
Yeah, there is a trigger. I think the biggest trigger is that I I was successful, and that they have this thought that a person can't have a disability and be successful, right? And I think what happened, um, and man, we just went through this whole process, and I'll get further along into that. But they were looking at me on TV. They were looking at me doing these documentaries and these shows and being kind of a subject matter expert where like local and national media would ask me, they wouldn't necessarily ask the doctors about PTSD and things like that.
Yeah.
And they started to look at me like, who is this guy? Like, how is he able to run a successful nonprofit if he has this permanent and total disability?
Yeah.
Well, that's a very easy thing to answer. Unfortunately, they never asked me until after they did the indictment and all the things, but I don't have an intellectual disability, right? And with mental health, it's like a roller coaster, right? So like there's days you have great days, and there's days where you're just almost paralyzed with anxiety and things like that. What I chose to do is to use the days where I felt like I could and make the most of them, right? To be productive, to be a contributing member of our country, of our society, of our community, and run the organization. But the whole purpose behind it is I hired people to run the day to day in case I couldn't do it, because there were days where I just couldn't do it, right? And so the issue was they believed that no one can be this successful and be disabled. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. You know, one good example, Tony, is the number one public speaker in America has no arms or legs. And his name's Nick, and I can't think of his last name. But
I think I've seen him.
Yeah, but one wouldn't look at this guy and go, hey, he's not disabled. And just because, you know, the majority of my injuries are invisible, right, doesn't mean that I can't do something other than sit in my basement with a pistol in my mouth. And so that created this issue of where it's almost as if they wanted to use me as an example, right? And
Sure.
and that's kind of that's this very very brief summarized version. But the point is, they felt like that I wasn't. They felt like that I wasn't as disabled as their doctors have continued to say since 2010. But deeper than that, and this can kind of be conspiratorial, and I don't mean to be, but just based on what I've experienced through this whole process, and it's been a year plus long process, is that if I would have been a veteran who volunteered at the local VFW for bingo night twice a week, nobody would have bothered me, right? But because I was out front and I was advocating, and sometimes in a professional way, I was exposing the holes in the system where veterans are falling through the gaps and they're not getting taken care of appropriately. Like, for example, one thing that I publicly said, and I stand behind it, is I feel like sometimes at the Veteran Business or Veteran Benefit Administration, where they award benefits, that they act like claim adjusters versus having a duty to award veterans for the medical issues and the mental issues they've endured because of their service to the country. You know, it was almost as if they have this duty to deny rather than having a duty to award. And I've said that, right? And so, you know, I've said it's not like this veteran's calling wanting a new roof, right? This veteran signed his life on a dotted line and said, hey, I'm healthy. That's why I can be in the military. And you all told me that if something happened while I was serving that made me less healthy, that you would take care of me. That's all they're wanting. They don't want anything for free. They've earned these things. And so nonetheless, man, I think a culmination of that and, you know, that made them, you know, target me in that way to try to stop the progress that we were having.
Other than the legal situation and that whole process isolated to itself, were there any other attacks on you via like socials and stuff? The reason I ask is I just went maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I went through a really good podcast episode between a guy named Mike Benz and Joe Rogan on government misinformation. And I just thought that was awesome. I took a whole bunch of notes on it, tying certain organizations into certain things that they do. And it just really blew my mind. So that's why I asked if you experienced that.
I have, man. one thing that I hate to say that I feel like I have to say now is way too many times veterans eat their own. The reality is I've been attacked more by veterans
Yeah.
than I have anybody.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
It
Now,
must have been Army, not Marines.
a
I'm
lot of
just
them
kidding.
are Marine Corps, man.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is, it could have been something as much as, this guy got this going. We can't get our programs going. And and just really try to kind of throw shade, right? Because maybe they're not as successful as they want to be, or because of the exposure our organization got, because people were asking me about foreign policy. They were asking me about veteran issues. They were asking me about the pullout of Afghanistan, which was terrible, right? They were asking me
Yeah, I
all
did
these
an episode
questions.
with a guy that was an OPSO for one of the Marine battalions out there. It was
Yeah.
one of my college buddies. Yeah.
Yeah. So they would attack me essentially for being successful. And then the other thing is when it comes to the VA and their policies, I was attacked for policies that do not exist. For example,
Or they
to
were
make
just
it,
created that day.
they were just created that day,
Possibility.
right? So like, for example, essentially, I've been convicted for volunteering too much, right?
Yeah.
There's no policy in the VA policies that have a limitation or restriction on volunteering. And in
Yeah.
fact, there's nothing in their policy that even mentions the word. And then, starting a nonprofit with my wife. And keep in mind, I think it's important for people to know this too. I did all this as a volunteer. I never received a salary from the organization, not even mileage for my vehicle. I've even given money. I've given many thousands of dollars into the organization before it was actually a nonprofit and we could raise money. So it wasn't like I was getting this big salary, right, as a CEO and getting benefits. That never happened. It's just because I spent as much time as I could helping people, helping veterans, and they felt like that for some reason I shouldn't be able to do that. It wasn't medical evidence that proved this. It was a law enforcement agent with the Office of Inspector General who had an opinion that I shouldn't be able to be this successful. But all the medical evidence that we pulled up showed over the course of many years that I do have these impairments. I do have these limitations. And even my therapist at the VA, who has seen me since 2018, who happens to be the chief of the PTSD clinic for the hospital, wrote a letter saying that, no, I've seen Mr. Harrell since 2018. He is right where he should be. And yet they ignored that letter and went with this law enforcement officer's report. They said it was more persuasive. He's not a mental health professional. So all that to say is that is what I would consider an attack, right? Because they don't have medical evidence that says, hey, you're better. They told me a long time ago that I was permanent and totally disabled with no future exams and no chance of improving, a static disability. Well, then they come back years later in 2022 and decide they want to start looking into me. Why? Because we're successful. Why? Because we're calling out the inadequacies of the government, how they treat our nation's heroes. And they don't like that. And so I think that was an attack as well.
I can resonate with that, being a target.
Yeah.
Part of the Mike Benz episode, something I wrote down was the something that he used to do. And then he was like, what am I doing? And he gets out of it. So the whole backstory on what Mike Benz did with this whole misinformation and kind of, he lays a whole bunch of it out, was he ran the cyber division for the State Department. And he talked about the dirty tricks in the fine print. And there's just so much of that. Like, talk about overregulation. You got Elon out there talking about Doge, and I'm all for that stuff, because the less things are regulated, the more things can happen.
Right.
And in this case, I'm sure there's something there. I don't know the depths of the story, but that sucks.
Yeah. Well, when you look at like government policy as a whole, it's very vague. And
on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because they want options. They want the flexibility to come down and crash on anybody they feel like they need to. And And it's the same way with the VA. They have these lax policies. For example, during trial, I had a 5-day trial. During trial, my attorney asked, what is your definition of work? And they didn't have one. But yet they were holding me accountable, saying that I was working instead of volunteering. How do you do that if you don't have a policy or a definition of work? And we even used the Department of Labor's definition, which is another government agency that says you receive compensation for tasks to be done. And they said that's not our definition. How's anybody supposed to know then, right? Like, how's anybody supposed to know what not to do if it's not clear? And that's what the government does, right? They don't
Sure.
don't have clear policies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lots of complexity there. Yeah. I'll keep moving. I wanted to ask you about the consulting work that you did, but it sounds like you consulted the VA.
Yeah, the VA, other organizations, and that's what I'm gonna do. I have to go to prison. I didn't know if you knew that, right?
Yeah, I saw that not too long ago, like December 10th was announced, maybe.
Yeah, right after,
Well,
this was the day after sentencing. So when I
19
get
days
done
ago.
with that, then I'm gonna get back into to consulting. There's a lot of people that hit me up and ask me, "Hey man, how do I get here? Or how do I do this? Or what do I need to focus on? Or what kind of leadership style do you think's the best?" This, I think it's going to backfire on the government, because I think one of their points to charging me was to try to take away my reputation, to kind of destroy my leadership. And in reality, it's done the opposite. I've had more people reach out supporting, number one, being supportive, but also asking me for advice. So it's really going to kind of backfire on them. What I hate about it all, Tony, is that they're kind of using me as the precedent, right? So if they can charge me with this, convict me, and send me to prison for it, well, then what do you think they're going to do to all the other veterans who are considered permanent totally disabled, who want to go out and help American Red Cross, or go do disaster relief, or Boys and Girls Club of America, any kind of volunteerism? What do you think they're going to do? They're going to target these people. But the negative part of that, outside of the charges, is nobody's going to want to do anything to help. And then what? I mean, we obviously can't rely on the government.
It makes you kind of hesitate. It may make a
Yeah.
lot of people hesitate on even opening their mouth about some stuff.
Absolutely. So yeah. So I do like consulting. I do like teaching. I love training. And so I'll continue to do that on a full-time basis.
Cool. You mentioned your mentors earlier. Who were they? Why were they such good mentors to you?
Man, I have some incredible folks on my advisory team. I have a retired brigadier general. I have a retired chief warrant officer 5. Those guys are like phantoms. You never hardly see them. Retired colonels, a couple retired colonels, one who is an attorney, who helps. You always need an attorney. That should always be one of your mentors, in my opinion.
I've got a few of them I've had on here so far, so it's good to know.
Yeah, just some really, really great people who and I think this is important for the listeners. They tell me what I need to hear. They don't tell me what I want to hear, right? So when you reach a certain level of success, oftentimes you'll be surrounded by people who tell you what you want to hear. Oh my God, you're so good.
You know what I watched yesterday? I got to tie this in because it's
Go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen Waterworld. That's one of my childhood favorites.
What is it again?
Waterworld.
Oh, I've never seen it.
Kevin Costner, the lead bad guy. He gets his eye blown out, and then they try and touch up his new eye. They put like a marble in his eye, and he's in charge of everybody, of the bad guys, the smokers. And he looks around the room, he's like, "Well, how's it look?" And everyone's like, "Oh, looks good. And he turns to a younger kid and he goes, "How's it look, Toby?" And he goes, "Looks like shit." We need that. We need that as humans. We need the honest feedback, right? So
that's right.
like those mentors were like that for you.
Yeah, and the other part of that is they didn't intend to just disagree with me for the sake of it. Like, they were always devil's advocate, right? They were always, because I have a heart to serve, and sometimes, a lot of times, honestly, my heart kind of kind of gets ahead of my brain, right? Because I see a need and I want to attack it, or I see somebody that needs support and I want to support them. But there's some liability in all this, unfortunately, because you have people out there who you can help them and they'll sue you for helping them wrong, or all the things
Yeah.
that you have to be
Fine
focused
print.
on. And they would always pull me back in and go, "Hey, that's good, but you got to consider these things." Or when it comes to leadership, or how I manage people, or how I manage my board, they would offer advice. And man, that has been a key component to success professionally and personally. And so if there's people out there who don't have at least a couple mentors, find you a couple people who have more experience than you, more knowledge than you, and then shut up, right, and let them talk and listen. I think that's key too. Is
Yeah.
you got to just be quiet and let them advise you and take what they say and apply it to your life. But yeah, I have a great team of
Yeah.
advisors, and they still advise me today. They've advised me not only on Veterans Club, but they advise me on legal stuff, or whether I should fight for this or whether I should fight for that. And in reality, as it pertains to my legal situation, I've put in a notice of appeal. I'm going to keep fighting this all the way up to the Supreme Court if I have to, because again, if we don't bring this to the right people's attention, it's going to keep happening to veterans, and it's not fair, right? Because it should be encouraged for veterans to get out of their basement, to go out and do something. It doesn't have to be something grandiose or huge, but just go out, find your one person, right, and help them do something good for the world, right? And so that's going to destroy the whole mentality if we don't get in front of it. So yeah, so they helped me through that as well. Yeah.
Gotcha. Listening on that topic, something that for me always, because I think a lot of folks like us, they'll hear something they don't like and be like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
key is a one night sleep on it for one night, and you
Yeah.
wake up. Like for me, that's a big deal because I have that, and I think a lot of people do, is that natural reaction of, this tough feedback is, that's not right. That's not me. Sleep on it. Sleep on it at
Yeah.
night, and go from there.
And another thing to that point, Tony, that I would recommend to folks who are listening is, what I've learned is that whenever we can put ego aside, things tend to be much smoother in our lives, right? And we
Sure,
tend to
man.
have less conflict. So if ego's an issue, and it is for a lot of people, and I'm not hating on anybody for it,
Yeah,
right? And
only 1 out of 9
yeah,
dudes are able to, I think.
yeah, right. But
Something about right. I don't know.
if you start practicing that, and
Yes.
you get good at putting it to the side, man, you're going to be golden. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's where the whole Bible thing comes into play.
that's right. That's right.
It's a good one to, if you practice it every day,
Yeah,
that'll do it.
that's right.
So on that topic, you're a subject matter expert in military transition, finding community, all that kind of stuff. What's your perspective on some of those complexities that veterans are seeing today with this type of deal too?
Well, I mean, I think there's so many. I think it's so many that it's overwhelming, right? I think we're getting too far away from common sense approaches. Veterans. I mean, the biggest advice that we can give for someone serving in the military who's leaving the military, whether they're just getting out or they're retiring, is to find your community, right? Find your tribe. That should be the first thing that anyone does, right? Is to get connected with other like-minded individuals and start networking. Start finding people who can help you move along, and it's death by PowerPoint when you get out of the military. Like they have all these PowerPoint presentations, and it's just so much that you can't really retain it. And I find a lot of it nonsensical. And I just believe that, just get out of the military, take some time, take some time to process all that you've been through, process, a whole career that you may have just, retired from, and take time to figure out who you are again outside of the military, and then reconnect with your family, right? Take time to reconnect with your kids. If there's some issue there, patch those issues up. If there's some issues in your marriage, work through that. And then once all that is built on a firm foundation, then start getting out into the world again. But be a little bit selfish with your family and allow your family to reconnect, right? Because oftentimes in the military, you're gone a lot, you're training a lot, and there's not a whole lot of quality time. And so, try to recoup that. And then once you feel like you have a good routine, then start thinking about what's next. But I think oftentimes veterans or people who get out of the military, they feel like they have to hurry up and find a career that was just like the one that they just left, or to find this other sense of meaning and purpose. And I get it, right? We all need purpose, but I think our first ministry is our family. And what good is it to have this other really interesting mission, but your family not be, connected and not be in community with each other? And so that's the way that I work with transition. Yeah, I mean, finding employment, awesome. That stuff, that's the easy part. The hard part is making sure people are healthy and they reconnect with the people they love, and they take some time for themselves, that they figure out who they are, and then all the other stuff will fall into place. But there's a lot of complexity within a military. There's so much unexplained processes out there for getting your benefits. How does one go about getting those? What is it? I mean, what doctor should I go to? It's just, how do I get my medical records from the military, right? Or how do I get a copy? Everybody should have one, right? But not everybody does. How do I get a copy of my DD-214? Those are the things that need to be addressed before they ever leave the facility, before they ever leave their duty station. Because when you don't do that, you're setting them up for failure. And so where we've come in is we've kind of worked with different agencies to collaborate in order to provide that for them. And collaboration is another important issue. Some of these agents, mainly non-government organizations, they kind of silo themselves. It's almost like they see veterans, helping veterans as a competitive sport. Well, these are our veterans over here. So I'm not going to refer them to you. And I think that's ridiculous, right? We should be working as a team, a collaborative effort to provide wraparound services to veterans. And that's what we've done. And that's why we've had the success we've had. And that's why we have more successful transitioning service members than a lot of these, government agencies.
Gotcha. Cool. A couple more questions. We'll wrap this thing up. You may have already touched on it, but I want to ask, because I always do this one towards the end, is what's one of your biggest struggles that you're working through today?
Man, I'm glad you asked that. One of the biggest struggles that I'm working through today is not allowing the behavior of others to penetrate my heart in a way that makes me be less of a man than I'm capable of being.
Awesome.
Right. And what I mean by that is, especially through this trial process, this legal situation, I've witnessed betrayal. I've witnessed people that I've done 1,000 favors for, right? Who have either turned their back or wasn't there to support when I needed it. And not allowing that to interfere with who I am and the way that I respond to people. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, because I think as a man, our initial response is, screw them. How do I get them back? Right? How do I make them pay for hurting me? Right.
Yep.
But all that really does is it lowers me to their level. Right.
Yeah, it lowers the bar.
Lowers the bar. And I'm set out to be different. Right. I've worked so hard on self-improvement, self-reflection, and especially in my faith to be set apart from the world. I don't want to act like that, but it's very difficult, right? Because I'm a man. I have emotions like everybody else, right? But it's just about how do I not allow the noise and the distractions to interfere in the direction that I'm trying to go to be better tomorrow than I was today? And so that's one of the number one things that I'm working on as of right now.
Awesome. Some unfortunate good news about that is, people have a short memory when times are tough.
That's right. Yeah.
It just happens all the time. But what a story. Last question is, what is your price of admission?
Man, I would say, the price of admission for me is suffering, right? And I believe that some of the most telling moments of our life, some of the best lessons that we'll ever learn is through suffering, right? Because when things are going our way, we have a tendency to take it for granted. We have a tendency to just assume that they should always go this way because we have this innate natural arrogance about us that tells us that this is what we deserve. But the Bible tells us that we're sinners who deserve death, right? But because Jesus came and he lived and he died and he rose again for our sins, that we're saved, right? So just when you're going through those times of hardship and suffering, just remember we're in a hurry, right, to get out of it because it's uncomfortable. It sucks. I'm not immune to that as a man, but what I've learned is that if I just hang tight and I just listen and I just try to find out what lessons should I be learning at this moment, it makes suffering more bearable, and it makes the comeback a lot more successful, right? So if you're going through hell, there's this old saying or phrase: if you're going through hell, keep going. But just sit there and listen sometime. Get out of your emotion and realize that facts aren't feelings and feelings aren't facts. And just what is it that I need to learn from this? And you will be amazed at what you learn and what you pick up and how it improves who you are. So I think the price of admission is, I think everyone must suffer in order to really find out what they're really made of and who they really are and how strong, right? How much grit and determination they really have, because it's like exercising, right? The more reps, the stronger you get. And then after you get to a certain point, you have to go up in weight. Otherwise, it's not challenging anymore. That's what I look at when I think of the price of admission and suffering, is that count it all joy, right? In trial and tribulation. That's in James in the Bible, right? Is, make sure that you're okay with suffering. And then when you're not suffering and you're at the peak of whatever it is that you try to accomplish, you're going to be much more appreciative. And so that would be my price of admission, in my opinion. Yeah.
ShamWow. Awesome. It's great having you on today.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
Appreciate your
It's good to
time.
meet you, buddy. Yeah.
Tell the family thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
I know how precious that is, especially right now.
Yes, sir.
So, best of luck to you, and thanks again.
All right, Tony. We'll be in touch. Thanks, brother.